What should you be keeping your eye on, monitoring in Week 17 for your IDP Fantasy Championship on the IDP Blitz this week with one Matt Schauf? And, well, let's start with a team that's in the news right now, not necessarily for great reasons, but let's bring it back around to the game this week for the Raiders. And, well, you can tell the Raiders aren't exactly interested in winning, which means they can really help your IDP fantasy team win if you play who at linebacker.
Oh, man. I mean, first of all, I wish that they would just announce, yeah, we're going to bench Derek Carr because we don't want to get locked into his contract for next year if he tears his ACL or something, because Jarrett Stidham is not a thing.
Right. It's not you. It's us. I mean,
on the defensive side, we just lost Denzel Perryman for the season. What a rough year for that guy. I mean, injury after injury. This one is a shoulder injury. He's out for the final 2 games. That leaves it as undrafted rookie Luke Masterson, which just sounds like a made-up player in a football movie, but he's real. He's an undrafted rookie linebacker, and he has 11 and 10 tackles the past 2 games. So we don't have to say this is what he might be able to do if he's in full-time duty. He's already done it the past 2 weeks and wasn't even a full-timer. Played about 2/3 of the snaps 2 weeks ago, played full-time snaps last week. So, I mean, we can go ahead and play Luke Masterson this week. Maybe it doesn't work out, but it wouldn't be one of those, like, what was I thinking? I think it's a pretty good spot for Masterson, especially against a 49ers team that likes to keep it on the ground, keep it in short range as much as possible.
Wasn't Luke Masterson at the OK Corral? So what were we thinking? What are we thinking if we want the replacement for Leighton Vander Esch on Thursday? We want the guy who's going to be running it, Derrick Henry, and trying to meet him head on in the hole. Who's that going to be?
I tell you, I was hoping last week that Damone Clark was going to be a guy for us because he had been coming on anyway, even with Leighton Vander Esch in the lineup, but he only played 69% of the snaps, only got 4 tackles against the Eagles. So he's not going to be an option for us yet, it looks like. I would still keep Clark in mind for Dynasty, stash him where possible for next year because Leighton Vander Esch's contract is running out, and he could certainly be a thing next year, but not for this week. It has increased the playing time for Anthony Barr the past couple weeks. First, the game that Vander Esch left early and the game he missed. Anthony Barr is a long way from actually giving us usable fantasy numbers, though. He's topped out at 7 total tackles this year. He's only topped 4 solo tackles once. That was 2 weeks ago, so it's recent. Maybe he gets some tackles. And I guess if I'm choosing between Anthony Barr and Damone Clark because I'm playing in a really deep league, then I'm going Anthony Barr. But I think you're probably better off in most cases looking elsewhere for a linebacker.
With that Dallas-Tennessee game, since it's Thursday's game, what are we thinking about Denico Autry, who was sensational in this Titans defense before he got hurt? How's he look since he got hurt? And should we try him on Thursday night?
Yeah, out since week 11 with a knee injury. I don't know about you, but I always kind of hesitate to play a guy his first game back after that kind of layoff. It was like 5 games, and he was still on the injury report with a biceps issue last week. So it's like, all right, let's see what Denico Autry has before we throw him back in the lineups. Turns out he's got quite a bit because he racked up season highs in total tackles with 7, solo tackles with 5. Had 2 quarterback hits against Houston, so that always helps playing against Houston. Forced a fumble, deflected 2 passes. So I'm going to go ahead and put Denico Autry in a lineup if I have that choice this week against Dallas.
The larger question, just a overarching thing. We talked about this on the preview show already this morning, but we have a piece that came out. Dan Hendry wrote it up real nicely. Week 17 motivation. We're thinking about that. As you started to put together your IDP preparation this week, Matt, does it change the calculus of that when we're looking at the defensive side? Because like I said, the Raiders, well, we can tell the Raiders are already looking to 2023, which actually can be a good thing for the IDPs because of more time on the field, more tackle opportunities. When you're looking at your projections, your rankings, your recommendations this week, does the amount of motivation, lack of motivation matter for IDPs?
I'm not changing anything this week for anybody that I know is playing. We're certainly watching for what coaches are going to say. And, since you brought it up after the Titans, we did already have Mike Vrabel say, I'm going to play everybody who's realistically ready to go on a short week. So Denico Autry will be an interesting player to watch. And we're going to have to watch the last injury reports for this week, which as we speak have not come out yet. We're looking for the Wednesday reports that have the game statuses. So obviously we'll have to see exactly who is in or out for this game, which is on a short week. And it's a game that the Titans don't need. But if a guy is active and I haven't heard anything about him playing a limited role, I'm going to go ahead and assume that he's in for full duty. And, we'll see what happens, I suppose.
Yeah, well, and you can get games like, I don't know, the Rams game, Rams Broncos last week, where sometimes when two teams are playing with nothing to play for, it can actually be a wonderful outburst. I'm looking at you, Atlanta and Arizona. Okay, let's check in on some situations we've been monitoring, if not all year, at least for the last month or two. Start with Jacksonville. It was Devin Lloyd. Devin Lloyd was the it guy in Dynasty IDP fantasy football. Then all of a sudden, Chad Muma was playing over him. Then Chad Muma gets hurt. Now they're both healthy. What's going on in this game where Jacksonville doesn't really have much to play for against Houston?
Yeah, Chad Muma's been back active the past 2 weeks. He has taken part, and his playing time actually picked up a little bit last week. He has not replaced Devin Lloyd in the starting lineup again, but he played about 30% last week, I believe. I don't have that number in front of me. Devin Lloyd came down to 69%. So if you just look at the tackle numbers, we got 8, 9, and 9 tackles from Devin Lloyd the past 3 weeks, stepping back in for Muma. So it seems like somebody that we can just go ahead and use, but it's not as safe as it looks. So I have Devin Lloyd not too high in my linebacker rankings. He's certainly still ahead of Chad Muma and somebody that you can use, but you got to be ready for that to be a risk factor with him and just not overrate him this week. It helps that he's really just been a tackle producer, since the early part of the season. Early in the season, he was also giving us plays in coverage. Looked like he was going to be an IDP stud right away. Right now, I would consider him a decent tackle bet, but also with the risk that he loses further playing time.
Matt, finally now in week 17, is there a Cleveland Browns linebacker that we can use in our lineup?
That you can use, probably that you can trust. I don't know if I would go that far. Here's how bad it is for Deion Jones at this point. It was like maybe a month ago that the linebackers coach is like, yeah, we're going to have him call plays. We're excited to have Deion here. Last week, Tony Fields played over him. Reggie Ragland played over him. Reggie Ragland, most recently, before being in Cleveland, was on the Raiders practice squad where he was not playing ahead of Luke Masterson, was not playing ahead of other Raiders linebackers whose names escape my mind right now because that's how prominent they are in the NFL. So Deion Jones is done. Tony Fields led the playing time last week. If you need to use one, I would use him. I would expect plenty of running in this game. Can you trust that Tony Fields is going to be on the field the most among linebackers? I would say he probably will, but I certainly can't say 100% that he will.
Reggie Ragland versus Brian Robinson. That's some Alabama on Alabama crime. It sounds like maybe that might be something. Two bodies meeting, going through the rye many times this week in that game. Let's talk about a situation where we have a tension between production and participation, and that's Jordan Hicks. Talked about that Arizona-Atlanta game. I mentioned it at least. Again, possibilities. Tyler Algier is probably going to run the ball 25 times in that game, right? Does that mean that Jordan Hicks' snap share is not necessarily the number to look at this week?
I think you're having a flashback and putting Jordan Hicks on his previous team. He's a Viking.
Oh, sorry.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm typing players out. I'll catch myself putting a player on a team that
right.
2 teams back.
Edit that. That's going to be Minnesota at Green Bay, but it's AJ Dillon, Tyler Algier. It's all the same.
Yeah, so Jordan Hicks had turned into somebody that we were just relying on week after week, and his numbers still look good. You wouldn't notice by looking at his stats that his playing time has been dipping lately. He did have 10 tackles last time out. He's defensed passes in 3 of his past 4 games. So he's somebody that you can use. But 3 straight games now, Jordan Hicks has given us less than 70% snap share. So he's not a safe play anymore. He's a usable guy. He had been somebody that I was consistently putting inside the top 10. At this point, he's in the mid to low 20s, which, like I said, still usable territory, but just be a little bit wary of trusting Jordan Hicks right now.
By the way, speaking of flashbacks, where are the flashbacks that I was promised, that we were all promised? 47. I'm still waiting.
It's supposed to be more fun.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be some delayed gratification here. Delayed gratification. If you've been waiting on Chase Young, you've been waiting all this time. We don't get points for PFF grades in our fantasy lineups, but will we get some points for other things in Week 17?
Chase Young has long been well, we'll see what happens next year guy for me. I'm not trusting a guy coming off of an ACL, especially when his team is like, we're going to wait until he's ready. He's not ready yet. No, he's not quite ready yet. He's not ready yet. He did play 58% of the snaps last week, so that's pretty good for waiting that long and then getting his first game action of the season. And, like you alluded to, he did grade well by the PFF numbers. He had 0 pressures, though. So I'm going to not go ahead and project 0 pressures into sack production this week, regardless of his opponent. And I'll just go on waiting until next year to see where Chase Young's at.
We're looking for some bright spots with the Colts. It's been a rough year, been a rough second half of the year, especially. They have thrown a lot of picks at defensive linemen. Some have worked out, some have not. Some are working on other teams like Denico Autry. We've seen Kwity Paye come through. What about Deo Odeyingbo, who they took in the second round last year, even though he had an Achilles tear? Are they looking smart for making that pick? Are you going to be smart if you use him?
It sure seems like it. And first of all, this matchup this week, I say go ahead and upgrade any of your Giants defenders against this Colts defense that we saw, or on the Colts offense that we saw on Monday night. But yeah, second year, Deo Dangbo, they talked about him like he could be a first round pick if he weren't coming off an ACL tear into that draft last year. His role has grown over the past 6 games. His pass rushing production has picked up over the past 2. He had a 2-sack game in that come from ahead loss to Minnesota a couple weeks ago. Then he had another sack and a half on Monday night against the Chargers. So now he's got the Giants. Giants are second highest in pressure rate in the league, according to Pro Football Reference. The Giants have been a negative matchup by the Draft Sharks adjusted fantasy points allowed for defensive linemen, but Daniel Jones has taken 3+ sacks 4 of the past 5 games, 10 of his 15 games overall. So I consider it a positive sack matchup. And the way Odeyingbo is playing right now and the playing time he's getting, it's not one of those guys where we have to project him to be especially productive on, 40% playing time. He's playing 50 to 60% of snaps, which is enough for him to get those pass rushing opportunities and deliver some upside for us.
Before we get to the last player we're going to talk about, I want to ask you just a overall fantasy football question about IDP leagues. If you were starting an IDP league from scratch, do you think that IDP should get credit for special teams, return yards, return touchdowns, block punts, etc., and offensive stats? And alternatively, should your offensive players, if they make a tackle on an interception or something like that, should they get credited? Do you like setting up the scoring? And this is something people need to think about when they're setting up their league, because it could be the difference between a team advancing and not advancing in the playoffs. You'll see where we're going with this. But what's your preference when setting up a new league?
I mean, I would say why not? As long as all the players are on an even playing field, as long as everybody knows what the rules are, I think players should certainly get credit for anything they're doing really in any phase of the game.
So on that note, is Marcus Jones getting enough playing time to be startable in Week 17? Does it even matter? Is what he's done enough for us to play him no matter what?
That is the best thing about his playing time picking up, because he was already this flashy guy that was making big plays. And recently the playing time has come up to meet that. He's a 3rd-round pick, so they already like him. It's not somebody that's coming out of nowhere. He did have big play touchdowns on offense as the punt returner against the Jets to win that game, had that interception return for a touchdown against the Bengals last week. And a lot of guys like that, you say, yeah, but you can't count on plays like that. But past 3 weeks, 89%, 100%, 90% playing time for Marcus Jones. Some of that is injured guys around him, but if I'm the Patriots, I'm sure putting Marcus Jones on the field as much as I can right now. And he's had 8+ tackles in 2 of those past 3 games. So it's not like he's doing nothing unless he scores a touchdown. He's doing enough for us to put him in the lineup and hope that he gives us one of those like weak difference-making plays, which he has obviously proved capable in multiple phases. He now gets Teddy Bridgewater on the other side, who has thrown the same number of interceptions as touchdowns and is limited duty this year.
I know what I would do if I was the Patriots. Only listen to Bill Belichick's input on draft day on the defensive side of the ball, not on the offensive side. Offensive line. But he does know how to pick defensive backs, and Matt Schauf knows how to help you pick winners for your IDP teams. This is the last IDP Blitz the year. It's been wonderful with everybody on this journey, adding in Gary Davenport, adding in the IDP show. And those guys are awesome. Truly a credit to the fantasy football community, like Matt, like John Norton, like Gary Davenport, like you, because you play the only real fantasy football. Remember, we're going to be with you at Footballguys, Matt, over at Draft Sharks. We've got free agency. We've got the draft, just playoff fantasy football too. We got to get some playoff IDP leagues going. I know my friends over at the IDP show were talking about that. So it's over kind of after this week, but not really. It's never over. And we love you for that because you keep encouraging us. It's a prep. See, I took privilege and pleasure, Matt, and it's a portmanteau. It's privilege or pleasure. It's all the good things serving you because you're so classy.